Hi, this is Beth at BethJones.net, and I just wanted to share a passage with you that I was reading this morning in my quiet time with God. This is John chapter 6, and what had happened is Jesus had gone on the Sea of Galilee, and he had a crowd had followed him because they had seen his signs that he had performed on those who were sick. He had been healing people. And Jesus went up on the mountain, and there he sat with his disciples, and there was a Passover. And he had asked Philip, "Where shall we buy bread that these may eat?" And he said this to test him. You know, sometimes in our lives we go through a test. Now, God never tempts us, but sometimes he will test our hearts to see where we're at with him, to see if we're going to obey him. And Philip said, 200 denarii worth of bread is not sufficient for them, and every one of them may have a little. And then one of his disciples, Andrew, Simon Peter's brother, said to Jesus, "There's a boy here who has 5 barley loaves and 2 small fish, but what are they among so many?" And Jesus said, "Have them sit down." And so they sat down, and then he did the miracle of the feeding of all these people. There were about 5,000 men there. And he took the bread and he gave thanks and he gave it to the disciples, and he had the disciples feed it to the people. And I always thought that part was interesting. Jesus had the disciples feed them. So God wants us to do the work. It's not just God doing miracles, but God is giving us the bread to give to his people. Jesus is the bread. The next chapter actually talks about that. Jesus saying he is the bread of life. After they were filled up, they got plenty. They were hungry and they were filled. They weren't hungry afterwards. They had plenty to eat. Afterwards, there was 12 baskets of fragments left over. So not only does God want to bless you, but he wants to give you an abundance. He wants to give you an overflow in your life. And then it says in verse 15, then the people were going, well, in verse 14 it says, "This is truly the prophet who is to come into the world." And then Jesus perceived they were about to come and force him to be the king. They're about to raise him up to be king in the land. And so now it says, his disciples went down to the sea. And that word "down" stood out to me. And I look back at the beginning of chapter 6, and it says they were on a mountain. So how many of you have had a mountaintop experience? God has done amazing, powerful things, just like I had happen in Kenya, Africa, when I went to speak there recently at the women's conference. And then you have to go down somewhere. You're down in the valley. The disciples went down to the sea. And then this is what happened. It says, it was already dark, and Jesus had not come to them. Then the sea arose because a great wind was blowing. So how many of you are in a dark place in your life right now? Things are not going well. A lot of stress, different situations are happening, and it just feels dark. You're in a very dark place, and there is a wind raging. There is spiritual warfare all around you. That's what's happening to me right now in my life. But there is hope. It says, so when they had rowed about 3 or 4 miles, they saw Jesus walking on the sea and drawing near the boat, and they were afraid. But he said to them, "It is I. Do not be afraid." God does not want you to be afraid. He's not giving you a spirit of fear, but of love and power and of a sound mind. And then it says, in verse 21, then they willingly received him into the boat, and immediately the boat was at land where they were going. Jesus had calmed the storm. But you see, the key was they willingly received him. First he told them not to be afraid, and then they willingly received him. So we have to be able to receive what God wants to give us and to obey him. Well, that was what I got out of this verse this morning, out of John chapter 6, and I hope it blessed and encouraged you. Thanks for stopping by my website today, and I hope you have a great day. This is Beth Jones at BethJones.net. See you later.